Welcome back to Behind the Line podcast. Today we're talking politics, power, and the paranormal. We're diving into one of the most explosive topics on Earth, and possibly off of it. The ongoing claims that President Donald J. Trump is prepping the biggest revelation of all, public disclosure of alien life and secret government UFO evidence. That's right. What sounds like science fiction is being talked about by members of Congress, UFO researchers, even in betting markets. But what's real? What's rumor? And what's just political storytelling? Let's unpack it. Earlier this month, International Business Times UK published a report highlighting recent claims by U.S. Representative Eric Burleson, a Republican member of the House Oversight Committee, saying that the Trump White House has leaned on the Department of Defense to grant congressional access to highly restricted locations associated with unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP programs. Here's the key takeaway. Burleson says that the Trump-supported congressional pushes to access Pentagon sites that allegedly contained unusual materials, aircraft, and maybe even non-human bodies. But here's what's critical, and what the original article makes clear. There's no publicly verified evidence that aliens, craft, or biological entities have even been recovered. The Pentagon and U.S. defense officials have repeatedly stated that they have found no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial contact or technology. So what does that mean? The request for access may be real, but what's behind the doors is unknown. Trump's position, transparency, or political hook? Let's take a look at the broader context. Trump has historically dangled hints about UFO files and Roswell-like mysteries. Back in 2020, during his first presidential campaign, he stated publicly he'd heard very interesting things about Roswell, but refused to elaborate further. In his second term, Trump also made a broader push for what his team called radical transparency, which included executive orders to release classified files on other topics like the Kennedy assassination records. But that transparency has been selective, especially when it comes to UFOs. Instead of a dramatic government dump of evidence, what we see being reported is more incremental and procedural. Congressional access requests, task forces, and political pressure. And that is the politics of disclosure. It's about momentum, not necessarily facts. You may remember pilot and intelligence contractor David Grush, who testified under oath in 2023 that he was told a long-running UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. This was widely reported at the time and became a catalyst for renewed congressional attention. Critics argued that Grush's claims were unverified and lacked clear documentation, but supporters said his testimony was a watershed moment for public UFO discourse. Now Burleson has brought him in as an advisor, signaling that the push for disclosure isn't fringe anymore, but gaining mainstream traction among certain lawmakers. Public interest and market buzz. Interestingly, outside of the political sphere, the public reaction has been dramatic. Online prediction markets once gave only a 6% chance that Trump would release UFO files, but by mid-December 2025, that number had surged to nearly 98%. This betting frenzy, nearly $6 million wagered, shows how seriously people think a disclosure may be coming. And that's separate from any official confirmation. It shows public sentiment, not political fact. Distinguishing facts, rumors, and hoaxes. Now here's where we have to be cautious. Some stories on social media and fringe outlets claim Trump has secret intelligence photos of alien bodies and is on the brink of exploding the truth to the world. Those narratives frequently reference past claims like the ones made by former Israeli space chief Haim Eshed, who once said aliens are real and have been in contact with governments, claims NASA officially denied. These kinds of stories make great headlines, but none have been verified by reputable sources. So if this podcast taught you anything, excitement does not equal evidence. So what's actually happening? Here's the grounded reality. Members of Congress want access to restricted UAP sites. There is no official released evidence proving extraterrestrial life. The Pentagon defense officials and NASA maintain they have no verifiable proof of alien contact. The political push taps into public distrust with fascination and secret government information. In other words, disclosure talk is real, but the evidence claimed remains unverified. Now let's take this one step further. Let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, that disclosure actually happens. Not rumors, not leaks, not grainy Navy footage. I'm talking about an Oval Office address, documents, physical evidence, and confirmation. What happens next? Because the biggest story wouldn't be aliens, it would be us. The immediate psychological shock. Human beings rely on what psychologists call a worldview framework. It's the mental structure that tells us who we are, where we came from, what's possible, and what's in control. Disclosure would punch a hole straight through that framework. For some people, it would trigger awe and wonder, the "we're not alone" moment. For others, for most, it would trigger existential anxiety, fear of loss of control, religious or philosophical crisis, distrust in government if secrecy is confirmed. Studies on mass crisis psychology from 9/11 to COVID show that when foundational assumptions are shaken, societies go through predictable phases: shock, information seeking, polarization, narrative formation. And that's where things get interesting, because how the story is framed will determine how people react. So scenario one, they're friendly.
We come in peace. We come in peace. We come in peace.
If the angle is they've been observing us, they're peaceful, there's no threat, you would likely see global unity at first. Historically, external threats or external mysteries unify humans temporarily. It reframes our tribal divisions. Suddenly it's not Democrat versus Republican, nation versus nation, it's humanity versus the unknown. There could be global summits, new scientific coalitions, a surge in space funding, renewed fascination with science and astronomy. Religious interpretation. Major religious institutions would respond quickly, most likely not with collapse, but reinterpretation. Throughout history, religions have adapted to heliocentrism, evolution, quantum physics. Alien life would likely be framed as part of God's creation. The economic effects. Markets would initially spike in volatility, defense stocks would go up, space and aerospace would go up, traditional institutions, there'd be temporary instability. But if the message is peaceful, markets stabilize. Humans adapt quickly when they feel safe. But scenario two, well, they're a threat. Now let's flip the script. If disclosure comes with "we don't understand their capabilities, they've demonstrated advanced control, we are not the dominant species," well, that's different. You're going to get a fear response. The human nervous system doesn't like existential threats. You could see and would see panic buying, civil unrest in certain areas, a surge in conspiracy narratives, distrust in institutions for hiding it, and there would be an immediate demand for military readiness, space defense funding, intelligence transparency, Governments might invoke emergency authorities. And here's the key: fear accelerates tribalism. People would look for someone to blame. Why didn't we know? Who covered it up? Are we safe? The first 72 hours would be crucial. The deep psychological impact. Beyond panic or excitement, the long-term effect could be profound. For the first time in human history, we would no longer be on the top of the food chain. That alters national identity, human superiority beliefs, our concept of evolution, our place in the universe. It could either humble humanity or terrify humanity. And I'm going to go with the terrify humanity part. History shows that when dominant groups lose perceived control, instability can follow. But there's another possibility, the long view. There's research showing that when astronauts see Earth from space, called the overview effect, they experience increased empathy, less nationalism, a greater sense of unity. Now imagine the entire planet experience a psychological overview effect at once. It could trigger global cooperation, technological renaissance, a philosophical awakening, or it could fracture societies along fear lines. That outcome depends on leadership, messaging, and transparency. And what do you think is going to happen? The trust factor. One of the biggest psychological impacts wouldn't even be aliens, it would be this question. If this was real and it was hidden, what else is hidden? Does that sound familiar to you for anything else going on right now? Trust in institutions is already fragile. Disclosure confirming decades of secrecy could deepen distrust, reinforce anti-government sentiment, spark reform movements, or if handled openly, it could rebuild trust through transparency. Again, the delivery matters more than the content. Here's the reality. Humans are resilient. We've survived world wars, nuclear brinkmanship, and global pandemics. We would survive disclosure. The question isn't whether we can handle aliens. The question is, can we handle the truth? And whether we trust the people delivering it. Because if disclosure happens, it won't just be about them. It will be about what kind of civilization we are. Now let's go somewhere uncomfortable. What if this isn't about aliens at all? What if disclosure, or even the threat of disclosure, is psychological warfare? Because if we're being intellectually honest, we have to consider another possibility. What if the story itself is the operation? Governments have long histories of psychological operations, or psyops, designed to shape public perception, influence behavior, justify policy shifts, and manufacture consent. During the Cold War, both the US and the Soviet Union ran massive disinformation campaigns. In 1990, the Kuwaiti incubator story was used to build public support for war. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq shaped global policy. Governments don't need aliens to run a psyop. They just need a narrative. So let's talk about Project Bluebeam. I'm sure you've all heard of that. Where did it come from? Project Bluebeam. The term was popularized in the 1990s by Canadian journalist Serge Monast. He claimed that the global elites would stage a fake alien invasion using advanced holographic projections, mind control technology, simulated religious apparitions, and psychological manipulation. The alleged goal? To create a global crisis so overwhelming that humanity would accept a centralized world government. Now here's the important part. There's no verified evidence that Project Bluebeam exists as an actual government program. It originated from conspiracy literature, not declassified documents. But the idea persists because it taps into something real. Technology capable of manipulating perception. Could technology fake it? Let's step back from the extreme claims and look at reality. We already have advanced drone swarms, military plasma projection experiments, and deepfake AI technology, satellite light projection systems, and highly classified aerospace programs. The U.S. military has publicly acknowledged decades of black budget research into stealth aircraft and advanced propulsion before they were revealed. So when people ask, could a government simulate a UFO event? The honest answer is it depends on the scale. Localized deception? Possibly. Global holographic sky projections? Highly unlikely with current publicly known technology. But perception manipulation? That's already happening daily through digital media. So why would a psyop happen? If, hypothetically, an alien disclosure narrative were weaponized, what would the motive be? Well, here are possibilities theorists suggest. Justifying massive defense spending. An unidentified external threat is the fastest way to unify populations behind military budgets. Distracting from domestic crisis. Major events can shift media cycles instantly. Well, we don't have any of that going on right now, do we? And centralizing authority. Emergency powers expand quickly during existential threats. History proves that. After 9/11, surveillance laws expanded dramatically. COVID expanded executive emergency authorities worldwide. Crises accelerates consolidation. The psychological leverage. Here's why an alien narrative is uniquely powerful. It bypasses politics. You can argue taxes, you can argue borders, you can argue policy, but you can't easily argue unknown non-human intelligence. That hits something primal. Fear of the unknown, fear of loss of control, fear of the sky.
Those things are going to come in here just like they did before, and they're going to come in here, and they're going to come in here, and they're going to get us!
And when fear hits at a civilizational level, populations become more compliant. That's not theory, that's behavioral science. Why it might not be a psyop. So let's ground this. Running a global deception of that magnitude would require thousands of insiders and zero credible leaks, perfect international coordination, no whistleblower documentation. Large conspiracies historically fall apart. Watergate fell apart, Pentagon Papers leaked, NSA surveillance leaked. Sustaining a fake alien narrative with physical evidence, international coordination, and scientific verification would be extremely difficult to contain. The most likely scenario, if there were a psyop element, it would likely be subtler. Not fake aliens, but controlled ambiguity. Release enough strange data to keep the public curious, keep Congress engaged, maintain classified aerospace secrecy, and blur the line between foreign tech and unknown phenomena. Sometimes confusion itself is the tool. So here's the big question. Is disclosure coming because there's something real, or because the idea of disclosure is useful? Project Bluebeam, as described in conspiracy literature, has no verified evidence behind it, but psychological operations as a concept, very real. The danger isn't believing in aliens. The danger is blindly trusting narratives, whether they say they're here or they're fake. The responsible approach? Skepticism without paranoia, curiosity without hysteria, demanding evidence, not emotion. Because whether this is extraterrestrial life, advanced aerospace, or strategic narrative management, the truth will hopefully eventually reveal itself. And when it does, we'll need clear minds. So here we are, at the edge of one of two possibilities. Either we are on the verge of learning we are not alone in the universe, or we are watching the construction of one of the most powerful narratives ever deployed in modern political history. And maybe, just maybe, it's something in between. If disclosure happens, it won't just be a scientific event. It will be a psychological earthquake. It will test our faith, our institutions, our leadership, and our ability to think critically. If they say the visitors are peaceful, humanity might unite, briefly. If they say they're a threat, fear could reshape governments overnight. And if it turns out the whole thing was a psyop, a manipulation of perception, then the damage to public trust could be deeper than any alien revelation. Because here's the real issue. It's not aliens, it's authority. It's transparency. It's whether the people who govern us tell us the truth or manage through narrative. I think we know the answer to that. History shows governments are capable of secrecy. History also shows humanity is capable of resilience. We survived world wars, we survived nuclear standoffs, we survived global pandemics. We can survive the truth. But we cannot survive blind panic, and we cannot afford blind trust. If something is in our skies, we deserve evidence. If something is being hidden, we deserve accountability. And if something is being manufactured, we deserve clarity. Because in the end, this isn't about extraterrestrials. It's about who we are as a civilization. Do we react with fear? Do we surrender critical thinking? Or do we demand facts, calmly, rationally, relentlessly? Whether this story ends with alien contact, advanced secret aerospace tech, or just another chapter in information warfare, the sky has always been a symbol of mystery. It may become a test. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and above all, stay grounded. Until next time.
Let's rock!
Coming out of the goddamn wall! Look!
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.